Sometimes people talk about the change being this like great change or this fun change. No, it's a destructive change, because in order to have transformation, you also have to have death. In order for me to transform who I was to who I am now, the liar had to die. The cheater had to die. That version of me had to die. They had to completely be obliterated. Not that I forget them, not that I don't know who they are, but that I was unwilling to tolerate that shit in my life anymore. Narcissists oftentimes go through different cycles. You've heard the typical cycle of, hey, this person love bombs, idealizes, puts you up on a pedestal, then starts to beat you down, starts to bring you down, starts to devalue you, then he discards you, then oftentimes he'll recycle you, he'll hoover you, bring you back, or he'll go to someone else and then he'll come back to you. And this cycle just continues. What did this actually look like in my life? What was this piece that is happening inside of how I was showing up on a day-to-day basis? Welcome to the piece of narcissism, where I talk about some of my story. If you guys are new here, my name is Ben Taylor. I'm a self-aware narcissist on this channel to provide awareness of narcissistic abuse. I help liberate women from toxic relationships by helping them understand the narcissist that's in their life and help them actually find healing. I also work with a few narcissistic men that have raised their hands and said, hey, that's me. How did you actually do this? And we work on building this piece of honesty to produce transformation. Because at the end of the day, the only person that can grow, change, and develop is simply you. You can't change him. You can't focus on him getting better. You can only transform your life. And you're unwilling to do that. You stay stuck, and you agree to stay stuck by focusing on someone else, thinking you can change them when you're not God. And even then, God doesn't force people to change. That would be narcissistic. He provides an opportunity, and that's it. So today we've got an opportunity just talking through a little bit of my story, Narcissistic Cycle. There's this piece as a covert narcissist of how I'm going to show up that's going to pit me as being the main character in the story without always being the main character in the story. I didn't always look like the puffed up, prideful person. Wasn't this piece of like, oh, I'm so amazing. Did I think that? Yeah, 100%. Because the majority of narcissists think that. There's not a ton of narcissists that are just beating themselves up internally. They are, but they want to be able to hide it, so they change the story. They make themselves believe that they're amazing. They make themselves believe that they're worth something. There's all these different pieces that are happening inside of narcissistic abuse. So as a narcissist, part of the piece that came into my cycle was playing the victim. There's this aspect of being in relationships, and I would be in a relationship. Let's say I'd be dating, be connected with someone for a period of time, and then slowly would start to see the relationship fade away. There'd be this piece where I would start to look at another woman. I'd start to think about being with someone else. I'd start to think about the high of that love bombing moment. You see, narcissists oftentimes are not falling in love. They're falling in infatuation. This idea of the love bombing piece, sometimes it's real for the narcissist too, where he's excited about the newness of it. He's excited about being able to connect, being able to fall in love. In reality, it's manipulation and grooming and all these other different toxic pieces. But in my mind, I was like, let me change it. I didn't realize I was grooming people till later down the road after becoming self-aware and reading Psychopath Free and realizing that a lot of the pieces inside of grooming another person, I viewed as love. I viewed as, oh, this is how I'm going to connect with this person. This is how a person makes friends, right? No, this is how a person manipulates and grooms other people. So there'd be this piece where I'd be in a relationship and then get bored. Be like, I'm bored of this relationship, because it would have to go to a different level of vulnerability. It'd have to go to a different level of depth. Narcissists as a whole are pretty shallow, especially in communication, especially in what they allow other people to see. I was shallow in the fact that I would go only to a certain level and certain depth, and then dealing with the hard conversations, dealing with the stuff of like, how do we actually navigate inside the relationship? Yeah, didn't want to deal with that. So as a result, I'd rather go find someone else that would understand me, that would treat me better, that would make me feel better, right? Victim mentality, okay? This is why I don't have a lot of tolerance for people that are victims inside of victimhood. Not the fact that you've been a victim or you've been abused, but the fact that you stay in victimhood and you don't actually change your mindset, your thought process to liberate yourself. Yeah, that's the piece that gets frustrated. If you've been a victim and then you stay in victim mode forever, well, you're always going to be stuck. It's interesting. My wife talked about victimhood the other day on a live. Just in that one live, when she brought up victimhood, like 200 people stopped following me. Like, well, they were the victims because they didn't want to hear what she was actually saying. where how she liberated her mindset and her thought process was no longer viewing herself as the victim and actually working on her own growth and development. A lot of times people don't want to hear that, and that's just a detriment to our society right now. A lot of people just want to be victims, don't want to actually take charge of their life, don't want to actually grow and develop. That was me. I wanted to be the victim. So as a result, inside the relationship, I would get to the place where I'd sense the other person pulling away. They're pulling away because there was no depth there. There's no depth in the relationship because I wasn't willing to go deep. I wasn't willing to actually open up. I wasn't willing to communicate my feelings, my emotions, those things. Yeah, right. So I could feel this. There's almost like an energetic shift that I could feel inside the other person of them slowly starting to pull away. Now, when this happens, I'm already planning the next escape. Like I'm already planning, okay, who's next? Who's the person that's going to help fulfill me? There's never this pattern of me being alone. There's this pattern of me getting ready as this relationship starts to go on the decline. I'm like, all right, let's start up another one. It was almost like this threshold, this baseline that we couldn't go below of me actually being alone, me not having someone. Now, sometimes this would be a girlfriend. Sometimes this would be like a friend. Sometimes it would be someone I could text or interact with or that make me feel better in the moment. But the majority of the time, it ended up being these relationships. From girlfriend to girlfriend to girlfriend, like from relationship to relationship over and over. It was this cycle. Now, I got to be this place where I thought this cycle was just going to continue. And I started to latch on the idea of like, maybe I can get this cycle to stop if I get married. Now, I started down this road inside of one relationship, got to the place where we're going to move towards engagement. Went and I talked to her father and he said no. And so I was like, well, that sucks. And this relationship's on the down, so let's go ahead and find another one. Started getting interacted with someone else. At that time, it was my wife. Started to interact with her. That relationship started to crash and burn very epically because I just wasn't a man to actually say, hey, this relationship's over. Instead, I just drug it out, gave a lot of little excuses, a lot of different things, trying to slowly let it fade out, and didn't actually just show up as a man and say, I'm done. So inside of this, then I'm starting this other relationship. Okay? It's still not a great way to be able to do this. I'm still not alone. Still don't have a period of time where I actually focus on me and change who I am. Instead, I'm still looking to other people to try to help validate who I am, to try to make me feel better about myself. All these pieces are at the same time still playing the victim. Still looking like, oh, people always leave me. That was the narrative I sold myself for such a long period of time. They left me because of me. Because I was an abusive asshole. I was controlling. I was manipulative. I wanted to make sure that I got what I wanted. And if I didn't, then I'd shame them. I'd guilt them into doing what I wanted them to do. And when they wouldn't do that, then I'd go to someone else. Like, why would anyone want to stay with that? But I had to spin the narrative so I didn't feel bad about myself, painting myself as a victim. So thinking, okay, marriage is going to fix this, right? Like committed, we love each other, this would be great. Like, boom. Well, got into marriage and realized marriage is not what it's cracked up to be. All the stupid premarital counseling that everybody says of like, just love God and work on this and skip over a bunch of different things. Not talking about personalities or personality tests or how to communicate together. Yeah, a bunch of that was worthless. Then we get into the marriage and the first year it just feels like hell. Feels awful. We're both only kids coming into it, not understanding how to be able to navigate this, thinking that we're the only ones with problems. So then we isolate, then we don't tell anyone else that we're struggling. Nobody else in our world tells us that they're struggling. And as a result, everybody continues just to crash and burn. It's just relationships in general from what we've seen. And inside of this place, I still played the victim. My wife doesn't get me. She doesn't understand me. She doesn't respect me. She doesn't do what I want her to do. She's not submissive. Like all these thoughts and narratives that I'm spinning in my head to try to play the victim. So as a result, then I think, okay, well, maybe someone else will. Like maybe I can find someone else that will actually validate me. Or maybe I connect with someone and then I'm like, oh, they get me. They understand me. And I'm like, yes, now I found someone. And then that someone turns into a relationship, and the relationship turns into an affair, and everything starts to crash and burn, and then we start the cycle all over again. There's been this cycle and pattern that had happened for so many years. And I got to a place inside of marriage, inside of several affairs, thinking, well, I guess this is just my plot in life. Like, I guess this is just going to be who I am. This is just going to happen. No matter what, it's just going to happen. So I might as well just get used to it. Might as well just get over it. This is just going to be a part of my life. Oh, well. Like I got to a place where I had to think, oh, maybe I'm just cursed. Every year, 2 years, I'll just have an affair and we'll move on. We'll get over it and boom, boom, boom. That's what the thought process was. It was awful. It was toxic. And it was destructive. Inside of where I stand today, it's completely different. But the narcissistic cycle, the piece of me, the coward, the abuser, the cheater, all of those different pieces had to die. They had to get destroyed. You see, sometimes people talk about the change being this like great change or this fun change. No, it's a destructive change, because in order to have transformation, you also have to have death. In order for me to transform who I was to who I am now, the liar had to die. The cheater had to die. That version of me had to die. They had to completely be obliterated. Not that I forget them, not that I don't know who they are, but that I was unwilling to tolerate that shit in my life anymore. I was unwilling for that to have space in my life anymore. Was unwilling for the lies to come into my life anymore, simply because I had to show up with honesty. I had to show up with truth, or else everything else would come back. Everything else would start to disintegrate. Everything else would start to fall apart. I'd start to play the victim, start to think the mindset, start to cheat, start to lie. All these things would happen again. But it had to be centered on this piece of honesty and truth. And it had to be centered on this piece that in order for you to have transformation in your life, something has to die. There's a version of you that's fearful, it has to die. There's a version of you that lacks confidence, has to die. There's a version of you that's afraid of who you are or where you are, has to die. There's a version of you that doesn't have this piece of the self-assurance, the self-reliance, of your worth, of your value, has to die. You're like, well, this sounds aggressive. Guess what? So is change. So is transformation. It's not this piece that's easy. It's this piece of showing up every day saying, how am I going to build back my life one step at a time? How am I going to build back my confidence one step at a time? How am I going to transform from who I am now to who I want to be one step at a time? I don't share my journey of how awful and toxic I was to how I am showing up now and just be like, oh, guess what? Go change your narcissist. Forget him. Focus on you. Focus on your transformation and your growth, because you're the only one that's changing. You're the only one that can possibly change right here, right now, because you're the only one watching this. You're the only one that's actually showing up, being honest and saying, hey, I'm tired of the life that I've been living. And if you're tired of that, you can actually transform. But it's going to take time, attention, and effort. But you have to be willing to let go of different pieces of you, the limiting mindsets, the stories you believe, the trauma bond to him, the addiction, thinking that you can't be better without him, thinking that your worth is tied up in him. You have to let some of those things die if you actually want to transform. Like if you want to actually be the person that God has called you to be, to expand, to grow, to rise, to develop, to be who you've actually been called to be, guess what? There's versions of you, there's parts of you right now that has to die for you to be able to grow. For you to be able to shed off different pieces of his lies, of his manipulation, of the fog that's been put on you, of the lack of confidence that you have, and the decision making where you don't have any clarity. There's different pieces that have to transform for you to be able to rise. My journey has been about transforming, but it's been about daily steps, daily evolutions that help me to grow, to shift, to change, to develop, to transform my life into who it is now. Being a man of honesty, being a man of integrity, being a man that is connected deeply with my wife. To have the life that we've built, to have the life that we've grown, to have the life that we've developed, connected, interacting, engaging on a level that we never would have imagined. Like our marriage, better than what we'd ever imagined. We could have never imagined this. Simply because the transformation that had to happen with me starting to die. Killing off the narcissistic cycle, killing off that version of me, attacking it day in, day out to say, this is no more allowed in my life. This is no longer a piece of who I want to be. This is no longer how I want to show up. And coming into this place with honesty and truth to provide transformation. Some of you are looking for transformation. You're not sure how to be able to latch onto it. You're not sure how to be able to unlock this piece of transformation in your life. I want to show you the same tools and resources that I've used, the same systems and analogies, the same thought process that I've worked through to transform this mindset, to transform my life. If that resonates with you, go to rawmotivations.com today and I'll show you how. I'll talk with you, explain with you what this actually looks like and how this can be true for you too. Are you ready to transform? It's not going to be easy. There's going to be parts of you that has to die in order to become who you're called to be.